Chapter 21 White Lotus with Green Tea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aunt Lin was still going on, bless her heart. Did you all see the news? The government's got this snow thing covered. We've got the power to handle it. No need to sweat it, they'll fix everything. Listen, if anyone's running low on supplies, we should all try to help each other out. It's just a snowstorm, it'll pass. No need to go crazy hoarding. She didn't get much of a response. It had been 2 days, and the storm showed no signs of letting up, which was starting to freak people out. Fang Yuqing texted Zhang Yi again. Hey Zhang Yi, you doing okay? Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. She probably figured Chen Zhanghao was taking care of her. He wasn't buying her concern for a second. Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, okay. Fang Yuqing sounded a little bummed, but she quickly followed up with, we're running out of food here. I remember you stocked up like crazy. Could you spare some? Someone gonna treat you to dinner later? Winking face. Zhang Yi smirked. Yep, there it was. She definitely wanted something. He remembered Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning buying stuff too the last time he was at the store, not as much as him, sure, but enough to last more than 2 days. Oh, that was a while ago. I didn't keep all that stuff. Truth is, I'm running pretty low myself. Fang Yuqing wouldn't let it go. Come on, just a few packs of ramen, right? You're in charge of the warehouse, you gotta have plenty. Zhang Yi played it cool. Nah, all out of ramen. See, this is all I got. He snapped a picture of the lobster and steak on his table and sent it to Fang Yuqing. Her eyes practically bugged out when she saw the picture. Damn it, Zhang Yi, what's your problem? You trying to piss me off? Next to her, her best friend Lin Caning peeked out from under the covers. It was so cold, they were sharing a bed. Lin Caning's eyes lit up green with envy when she saw the food. These girls didn't know how to cook to save their lives. They usually just ordered takeout or had guys take them out, but with the city shut down because of the snow, they were both starving. They were stuck eating instant noodles and canned food they normally wouldn't touch. Seeing Zhang Yi chowing down on lobster and steak made them both furious and jealous. Furious because Zhang Yi was eating it all himself and not sharing. Lin Caning jumped in, dripping with sarcasm. Wow, Zhang Yi is such a jerk. He's got all that stuff and didn't even think of you. And he used to say he liked you. I think he's a total phony. Fang Yuqing was steamed too. This wasn't the first time Zhang Yi had sent her pictures like this. She knew he was just trying to get a rise out of her, but she was convinced Zhang Yi still had a thing for her and was just using this as a bargaining chip. Please. It's just a little food. He thinks that's gonna get me to be his girlfriend. Zhang Yi, you're so clueless. Fang Yuqing pretended to be disgusted. As a professional heartbreaker, she had to maintain her untouchable image, but looking at the photos Zhang Yi sent, she couldn't hide the hunger in her eyes. Lin Caning knew exactly what she was thinking, so she suggested, Yuqing, why don't you tell Zhang Yi you'll have dinner with him? But he has to provide the food. That way, you save face and get to eat lobster and steak. He'll be so excited, he'll say yes in a heartbeat. Fang Yuqing frowned. Thinking it over, Zhang Yi was just a backup plan in her book. Sure, he was cute and had some money, but he still had a long way to go before she'd consider him tall, dark, and handsome material. Normally, there was no way she'd ever stoop so low, but right now, she really couldn't face another day of instant noodles and canned peaches. Fine, give him a chance to take me to dinner, Fang Yuqing said. Reluctantly, she grabbed her phone and texted Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, it's been a while. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? Zhang Yi laughed when he saw the message. You wanna treat me to dinner? Okay, thanks. That sentence made Fang Yuqing's face turn white with anger, or maybe it was just the cold. She grumbled to Lin Caning, that ungrateful Zhang Yi. I'm giving him a chance to treat me, and he expects me to pay. Lin Caning was surprised. She hadn't expected Zhang Yi, who used to be so into Fang Yuqing, to suddenly act so clueless. Weird, was the lapdog finally growing a spine? Fang Yuqing threw her phone down in a huff. She said angrily, I was planning on keeping Zhang Yi as a backup. Now he's going to the end of the line. I'm so pissed. From now on, I'm not saying another word to him. He can beg all he wants, it won't work. Lin Caning, who was just as hungry, egged her on. It's not like he's got much going for himself anyway. He's trying to chase you, but he's such a cheapskate. That kind of guy deserves to be single forever. They went on ranting about Zhang Yi for a while. Every so often, Fang Yuqing would pick up her phone, expecting Zhang Yi to apologize, but there was no word from him, and her face darkened with rage. Lin Caning had an idea. She secretly sent a message to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, why are you being so dumb? Yuqing's upset. Do you know how big a deal this is? Zhang Yi glanced at the message out of habit. Checking his chat groups had become his new form of entertainment. What could be more entertaining than watching human nature crumble in the apocalypse? Seeing it was from Lin Caning, Zhang Yi laughed. Bad cop, good cop, huh? You two are such drama queens. Zhang Yi had seen through this whole act a long time ago. Lin Caning was just helping Fang Yuqing play the game. Fang Yuqing needed to maintain her innocent goddess image, so Lin Caning was the one who hinted for gifts and nudged guys to spend money on Fang Yuqing. Chapter 22. It's better to use a spare tire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi played dumb. What's up? I didn't do anything wrong. Lin Caning shot back. Are you kidding me? The city's shut down because of the snow, and we're practically out of food. Wouldn't it be smart to send Yuqing some goodies as a show of loyalty? If I were you, I'd send over all the steaks, lobsters, the works. Once Yuqing's impressed, your chances will skyrocket. Zhang Yi read Lin Caning's message, picturing her greedy expression. He scoffed. How was this any different than begging for scraps? The ridiculous part was they were acting like they were doing him a favor, like he was the one being given a chance. It made Zhang Yi want to slap them silly. Leeches. Zhang Yi decided to play with these two-faced girls, he replied, but we're running low on food here too. Just enough for me to get by. Lin Caning frowned, instantly critical. Are you for real? How long can this snowstorm even last? Suck it up for a couple of meals, then win Yuqing over. You'll be set for life. You're getting stingy over something small. Sounds like you're not that into Yuqing after all. Zhang Yi just chuckled. Good cop, bad cop. They really thought they were playing him. Too bad for them. Zhang Yi had been reborn and saw right through their act. Faced with Lin Caning's manipulation, he simply replied with a casual okay, tossed his phone aside, and ignored her. Lin Caning seethed when she saw the okay. Okay? What do you mean, okay? I'm trying to help you out here, and that's the attitude I get? Just send the food over already. I want steak and lobster, too. Lin Caning had a serious appetite. She hadn't eaten anything decent in days, and hearing about Zhang Yi feasting was making her drool. Her plan had been to use Fang Yuqing's name to trick Zhang Yi out of his stash of goodies, but things weren't going according to plan. That single word, okay, nearly made her snap. Could it be, he was losing interest in Fang Yuqing? No way, impossible. Lin Caning remembered Zhang Yi's devotion to Fang Yuqing over the years and immediately shook her head. He must just be having a temporary lapse in judgment. Furious, Lin Caning went to Fang Yuqing to complain. Of course, she framed it as if she was trying to score supplies for Fang Yuqing's sake. Fang Yuqing just gave a cold look. Ugh, who's Zhang Yi? Do I even know him? Don't mention him to me again. If Zhang Yi wanted to crawl back now, he'd have to grovel for what he'd done and spend a fortune begging for forgiveness. Lin Caning nudged Fang Yuqing. Zhang Yi's being difficult. Don't you have other guys who do anything for you? There were plenty of warehouse workers in their building, like Zhou Peng, who was always fawning over Fang Yuqing. Fang Yuqing knew exactly who Lin Caning meant. She curled her lip in disgust. Zhou Peng wasn't even spare tire material. Sure, he worked at Walmart, but he didn't even own a place in Tianhai City, still renting. Fang Yuqing just used him for small favors and didn't think much of him. Lin Caning suggested, it's freezing out, and the snow's coming down hard. Why not use him for now? Let him run errands for us. Fang Yuqing's eyes flickered. Lin Caning had a point, so she messaged Zhou Peng in less than 5 minutes. Zhou Peng was there with a backpack full of food, working at a Walmart warehouse. He often brought home discounted goods, so he always had some supplies on hand. Fang Yuqing's message gave Zhou Peng a rush, and he'd carefully selected the best things to bring. He even puffed out his chest and promised, "Yuqing, whatever you need, just say the word. You know I'd do anything for you." Fang Yuqing actually gave Zhou Peng a smile. "Thank you, Zhou Peng. You're so sweet." She dismissed Zhou Peng with a few kind words. Then went back inside, her expression instantly changing. "PSSH, you're such a loser. You actually think you have a chance with me? In your dreams." The atmosphere in the building was getting tense, even with the heat blasting. The temperature inside was below freezing. Southerners in Tianhai City weren't used to this, plus, they weren't in the habit of stocking up. 2 days of this freeze had already emptied their refrigerators. Aunt Lin was still insisting everything was fine and the snowstorm would be over soon, but everyone was starting to panic. Zhang Yi watched it all with amusement. He was prepared for anything and was living even better than before, like an outsider. He was just watching the drama unfold. After Zhang Yi taught Chen Zhenghao and his brother a lesson, they stopped bothering him. At least for now, they knew they couldn't get through Zhang Yi's defenses easily, plus, one of Chen Zhenghao's legs was basically useless. If he didn't get to a hospital, he'd be crippled for life. The other thugs were all sick and feverish from being soaked, without warmth. They were dragging their sick bodies around. They'd probably die of fever before they starved. Zhang Yi spent his time playing games and scrolling through chat groups. When he got bored, he'd exercise. He had plenty of high-end fitness equipment at home, or he'd read through the professional books he'd downloaded online, like the Barefoot Doctor's Manual and the Militia Training Manual. It was best to be prepared and learn these skills. They might just save his life someday. The snow was falling heavily, and the sky was so dark it was hard to tell day from night. On the morning of the 3rd day, Zhang Yi woke up, grabbed a delicious Bianyafang roast duck, and checked the clock. Almost time. The fun's about to start, Zhang Yi said softly, and right then, the group chats on his phone blew up. Chapter 23 Water and Power Outages. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 days after it was all over, the real fun began. Zhang Yi, knowing what was coming, stayed up all night, eager to see the show, and it was pretty straightforward. The entire Yuelu community suddenly lost power. Soon after, a chain reaction triggered a complete water shutoff. No electricity meant no water. Every household was high and dry. Zhang Yi had expected this. From the jump, nobody knew how long this deep freeze would last. The authorities were trying their best to cope with the snowstorm, but by the 3rd day, it became clear, this wasn't a problem they could fix. The cold had knocked out major hydroelectric plants, and thermal plants couldn't operate because workers couldn't get to them. Cities across the country burned through their reserves, and blackouts were inevitable. Maybe a few nuclear plants were still running, but that power was going straight to government agencies. For everyone else, life plunged into darkness. Zhang Yi checked his phone. Chat groups were blowing up with notifications. Anyone got power? We're out. And the water's gone. What's happening? No power, no water. It's freezing in here, the AC's useless, and no heat. How are we supposed to live? Where are the officials? People are going to freeze to death. Zhang Yi shook his head. The authorities had bigger problems now. Survival was on you. He knew the world was really ending. Without power or food, people were going to die in droves. Zhang Yi glanced around his apartment, a safe and cozy refuge. He thought of the endless supplies in his private dimension, and a feeling of warmth spread through him. The community group chat was filled with nervous complaints. How long will this last? The AC's dead. It's gotta be below 0 in here. People will freeze to death. The water's off. Are we supposed to drink melted snow? We're running out of food. We can't even get to the store. What do we do? Someone started blaming Aunt Lin. Aunt Lin, you said everything was fine. Yeah, we listened to you and didn't stock up. Now what? When's the rescue coming? Tell us. Aunt Lin was frantic. even more scared than her neighbors. They didn't know how bad things were, but Aunt Lin had gotten intel from the neighborhood committee. This blizzard is worldwide, a once-in-a-lifetime event. Maybe we're facing another mass extinction, the end of the world. The government's doing its best, but they can't take care of over 1 billion people. Major cities have fallen. We're on our own. We need supplies, especially food and heating fuel. I'm going door to door, asking for supplies in the committee's name. Isn't that taking advantage of people? Taking advantage? If I don't, my family will freeze to death in 3 days. I can't worry about that. I don't know how many will die in this mess. I have to take care of my own first. Yeah, we need to get more supplies while we can. Survival comes first. Aunt Lin stared at the messages, trembling. It was below zero inside, but cold sweat streamed down her face. She lay in bed, buried under 3 thick quilts. She was suffocating, but she didn't dare to move. The room was an icebox. Her grandson, Xiaohu, asked from his bed, "Grandma, why is it so cold? When are Mommy and Daddy coming home?" Aunt Lin looked at Xiaohu, her heart sinking. She just talked to her son and daughter-in-law. They were stuck in a rental out of town, just as badly off. I have to protect us both, we have to survive. Aunt Lin bit her lip, a fierce look in her eyes. It's okay, Xiaohu. They'll be back soon. After comforting Xiaohu, she picked up her phone and started typing in the group chat. Everyone, this is temporary. The weather's bad, so we're having some problems. Don't worry, they're working on it. The government has announced that the neighborhood committee will manage the community. We need everyone to cooperate. If you don't, there will be consequences. The police will be involved. Aunt Lin's words were harsh, they sparked anger. People couldn't believe the committee was threatening them. Still, they were scared. No one dared to speak out. Zhang Yi watched Aunt Lin's messages, amused. He smirked, knowing she was lying. In his last life, she'd used this trick to scam people out of their supplies, but he wasn't going to expose her. What did he care what happened to his neighbors? Zhang Yi turned on the TV and started playing his game. No water, no power. No problem. He had tons of spare batteries, plus engines, fuel, and solid alcohol and water. He'd hoarded over 130,000 gallons of tap water, not to mention all the bottled water and soda in his warehouse. If he needed to, he could melt snow. He had plenty of fresh water and power. Chapter 24 Aunt Lin's Threat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi was chilling, playing video games and munching on imported snacks. Meanwhile, all of Tianhai City, pretty much the whole damn world, was dealing with water and power outages. The water issue was the easier one to handle. If you were desperate, you could always go outside and melt some snow, but the power outage, that was a real nightmare. Modern folks are soft. Being exposed to those sub-zero temps would kill them quick. Zhang Yi's neighbors were freaking out, huddled together for warmth, praying for a miracle. Fear will do that to you. Chen Zhenghao, the guy Zhang Yi broke his leg, was dragging himself around his place, half frozen, already injured. Now he had to live in freezing temperatures. Double whammy. And his little buddies? Even worse. Zhang Yi only hosed them down that one time, but in this weather, with no heat whatsoever, the indoor temperature kept dropping, matching the outside, hitting 50, 60 below. Some of them were running fevers, spiking as high as 104. They weren't prepared. Didn't have any ibuprofen at home, and in this weather, forget about going out to buy any, so they just had to suffer, which was exactly why Zhang Yi didn't finish them off back then. Letting them freeze to death in despair, day by day, was way more satisfying than a quick kill. Zhang Yi sat on his rug, glued to his game. Outside was a blizzard, with a howling wind and heavy snow, but inside, a cozy 80 degrees, lights blazing, no worries about food or drink. Entertainment galore. If there was one thing missing, maybe it was a woman to keep him company, but Zhang Yi wasn't some brainless idiot. He'd learned his lesson about women in his past life. This time around, his safety and comfort came first. He wasn't letting anyone into his safe house unless he was absolutely sure. In the apocalypse, you couldn't trust anyone, he'd seen a woman beat her husband to death for a pack of ramen, firsthand. Just then, Zhang Yi's phone lit up. He grabbed it, curious, and saw that Aunt Lin had tagged everyone in the building's group chat. This blizzard is causing major problems for everyone. Official word is, this snow's gonna keep up for a bit. So, to get through this together, to make sure everyone can survive with some dignity, the neighborhood committee will be collecting everyone's supplies and distributing them evenly. This is official. Everyone needs to cooperate. If anyone's selfish and doesn't follow the rules, they'll be dealt with later. Don't think you're too good for us. Remember, everyone has someone they care about. Zhang Yi snorted. Same old song and dance. As part of the neighborhood committee, Aunt Lin didn't have much power, but she had better intel than most. She probably knew the world was ending way before anyone else, and that the government was MIA in Tianhai City. That's why she was trying to sweet-talk and threaten everyone into giving up their supplies. But Aunt Lin's tactics were pretty weak. After all, she was just an old woman with a middling education. Anyone with half a brain could see something was off about what she was saying. Even if the government was doing a unified control thing, they wouldn't put it like that. Still, there were over 50 families in their building. Some of them were bound to be scared enough to listen to Aunt Lin. Zhang Yi wasn't planning on getting involved. He just wanted to watch the show. Sure enough, this time, because Aunt Lin was being so aggressive about confiscating everyone's stuff, some people started to panic. Wang Min, who lived on the 15th floor, was also Zhang Yi's co-worker. Being the thrifty type, she often brought stuff home from the warehouse. Everyone knew it. If Aunt Lin was collecting supplies, her family was screwed. Wang Min said, the doors are all snowed in, we can't even go out. Everyone has enough food to eat. Why collect it and redistribute it? It's insane. Another resident, Sun Jichao, chimed in, everyone's struggling. It's hard enough to save some food. You wanna just take it? That's messed up. Aunt Lin gritted her teeth and tapped the voice button. I said before, this is an emergency, and we need emergency measures. The snowstorm won't last forever, don't worry. It's just about redistributing supplies. Right now, a lot of people have nothing to eat. Are you really gonna be that selfish? Think about your neighbors. Some folks had stockpiled, so naturally others were running low, so the ones running low jumped in to support Aunt Lin. That's right. We're all neighbors. What's wrong with helping each other out? It's just a little food and water, right? It's not like anyone's starving on a normal day, it's just these few days. This is an organizational decision. You don't follow it, you'll face the consequences. The group chat turned into a shouting match between two sides. Zhang Yi stayed silent, and those two goody two-shoes, Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning, kept quiet too, because they actually had a ton of supplies. But knowing them, they'd rather die than hand anything over. Zhang Yi's plans for entertainment got cut short. Even though he hadn't said a word, Aunt Lin messaged him privately. Xiao Zhang, you work in the warehouse. You must have a ton of food and drinks at home, right? I remember you bought 3 carloads of stuff last time. Now that everyone's in trouble, it's your time to step up. Don't worry, we'll definitely give it all back once the snow stops. Everyone will remember your kindness. Aunt Lin was starting by riling people up in the group, scaring the timid ones. Then, she'd break through, one by one. If she could trick one family, she could get enough supplies to keep her and her grandson alive for a few more days. Zhang Yi, the warehouse manager at Walmart, was now Aunt Lin's prime target. Chapter 25 Scolding the Old Woman. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi scoffed. In his past life, he'd seriously underestimated the snowstorm. Thinking he was doing his neighbors a solid, he'd shared some of his stockpiled supplies. And what happened? Instead of gratitude, they figured he had plenty more. Where that came from. The end result? His apartment was raided, he was killed, and his body was used for food. You could even say that old lady Lin was partly responsible for his death. A smirk played on his lips as he lazily typed out a message. Perfect. We're all out of food. Aunt Lin, when you've gathered everything, please share some of your haul with me. Aunt Lin practically blew a gasket, cursing him out loud in her apartment. Yeah, right. You're pulling my leg. You're loaded with supplies. After working at the warehouse for so long, I don't buy that your hands are clean. That she was so sure because Zhang Yi often helped his neighbors snag discounted stuff from the Walmart warehouse. Things like damaged packaging and almost expired food were sold dirt cheap. As employees, they got first dibs. Sometimes, the warehouse even gave stuff away as employee perks. Aunt Lin's face was turning purple. She gritted her teeth. But she wasn't giving up yet. She was convinced Zhang Yi was a goldmine. If she could just pry it out of him, the two of them could score a ton of supplies and make it another week easy. Aunt Lin took a deep breath, her tone shifting to a sickly sweet, but firm, voice. Xiaohu, don't mess with your auntie. Everyone knows you're a supervisor at the Walmart warehouse. You can't be short on food, now can you? This is an order from the community group, and you must obey it. You'll be contributing to the greater good. The community and the group will remember your good deeds. Just be a good boy, hand everything over to your auntie, and set a good example. Zhang Yi picked up a toothpick and started cleaning his teeth. He'd had roast lamb for lunch, and it was a little heavy. He drawled, I'm not kidding, I've eaten everything. These days, I'm emptier than the landlord's wallet after rent's due. Hey, Aunt Lin, how about you give me some instant noodles? As a member of the neighborhood committee, you gotta lead by example and show some spirit. Zhang Yi said sarcastically. Seeing that Zhang Yi wasn't budging, Aunt Lin knew she wasn't getting anywhere with this. She deepened her voice and emphasized each word. Zhang Yi. Are you trying to give me a hard time? Don't think I'm speaking to you personally. I am speaking on behalf of the community group. If you refuse to hand over the supplies, you are fighting against the group. I will deal with you later. Zhang Yi scoffed. Yeah, right. You're representing the group. You're so full of it. You're just a clerk on the neighborhood committee. You're not even a glorified paper pusher. You can sweet-talk those old folks all you want, but if you think you're gonna try that crap with me, you've got another thing coming. Do whatever you want, I'll be waiting at home. Zhang Yi ruthlessly exposed Aunt Lin's true colors. The neighborhood committee staff are basically volunteers. They don't even have government jobs. Besides, Aunt Lin was just an errand runner, not even a low-level supervisor. Of course, even if she were a big shot, Zhang Yi wouldn't be intimidated at this point. After giving Aunt Lin a piece of his mind, Zhang Yi hung up and blocked her number. He didn't have the time or the patience for a shrewish old woman who liked to curse up a storm. His actions nearly made Aunt Lin's head explode. That Zhang Yi was crossing her repeatedly, rubbing her nose in the dirt. How could she, who likes to call herself a community leader, possibly endure this? Zhang Yi, you damn thing. I really want to kill you. Aunt Lin screamed in anger, but all she could do was yell. She couldn't protect herself right now, let alone do anything to Zhang Yi. She thought about kicking Zhang Yi out of the residents' chat group, but on second thought, that wouldn't really hurt Zhang Yi. She even thought about telling everyone in the group to gang up and shame Zhang Yi, but then everyone would know that Zhang Yi refused to hand over the supplies, and if everyone did the same, she wouldn't be able to con anyone, no matter what. She couldn't touch Zhang Yi right now. The more Aunt Lin thought about it, the angrier she got, and the more she stewed, the more uncomfortable she became. But she had no choice but to swallow her fury. Right now, her top priority was to lie to everyone else. She had to rip them off for all their supplies before they wised up. Over the next 2 days, Aunt Lin used a mix of sweet talk and threats to squeeze some supplies out of several families, but not everyone was a pushover. In the apocalypse, everyone's number one concern was how they and their families would survive. Some people chose to give Aunt Lin the cold shoulder, others were more aggressive and simply told Aunt Lin to take a hike when she came asking for supplies. As for people like Chen Zhenghao and Su Hao, who weren't easily manipulated, she didn't even have the guts to approach them. Zhang Yi was watching it all unfold on his security cameras, but he figured he should just chill and enjoy his food, and not get involved in other people's drama. it was now the 5th day since the ice and snow storm had started. Most people only kept 3 to 5 days worth of food on hand in their building, because some people worked in large warehouses, they had slightly more supplies at home. But with the freezing temperatures, heating required fuel and food, so supplies were running out fast. Over the past few days, a hostile atmosphere had begun to bubble up in the chat group. The residents, who had initially been timid and waiting for official rescue, were now starting to crack due to the lack of fuel for heating and the scarcity of food, especially those people who had been tricked by nThe and had their supplies taken away. They finally lost it and started demanding answers from nThe in the group about how the supplies would be distributed. At 25 #1 unit 1502 Lin Chuanxia, nThe, what about the materials you promised to distribute uniformly after they are taken away? We have eaten all our food. It has been 2 days. Please bring us some. Yes, we agreed to distribute them uniformly so that everyone has something to eat. The residents began to yell, including those who had not handed over anything before, hoping to take advantage of the opportunity to get a piece of the pie. nThe seemed to have vanished without a trace. Of course, she could see the messages, but she had no intention of handing over any supplies at this point in the entire building. Only she and Zhang Yi really knew what was going on. The outside world had descended into chaos. You could only survive if you had supplies, otherwise, you could just sit around and wait to die. She hugged her grandson, huddled under 5 layers of blankets, and muttered through gritted teeth, "You think I'm gonna give back the supplies that I worked so hard to swindle from you?" Chapter 26 The Gangster Eats the Gangster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seeing nThe wasn't answering no matter how loud they yelled, the neighbors finally realized she'd conned them. The chat group exploded with angry messages directed at nThe, but she'd already lost all credibility the moment she decided to lie. So, naturally, she didn't give a damn about the neighbors' complaints. However, someone else had his eye on the supplies she'd scanned, like Zhang, the local thug. Even though it had only been 5 days since the apocalypse, nobody knew what was really happening outside, so, it wasn't yet a free-for-all for resources. Zhang Yi remembered that Zhang would later lead a gang, robbing and even killing people for supplies, but right now, he wasn't about to start raiding his neighbors. After all, not everyone had lost their minds. Some people still had a few brain cells working. Even Zhang, who'd had his leg shot, wasn't rushing to break into Zhang Yi's place without a solid plan. Right now, Zhang's gang had burned through a lot of their supplies. Guys like him weren't exactly known for stockpiling. The fridge was full of beer, but it had been frozen solid. It wouldn't exactly fill you up, and if you wanted a drink, you had to chew on ice shards. Then nThe pulled her stunt, and Zhang saw an opportunity. She was talking about collecting and distributing supplies equally. He'd scoffed at the idea at the time, but now it was clear she'd sweet-talked some of the neighbors out of their stash. Now, he had a perfect excuse to take it from her. Even after the snow melted and things got really chaotic, nThe wouldn't dare make a fuss, so, Zhang grabbed his phone and called nThe. nThe was at home, happily munching on cookies with her grandson, Xiaohu. She was saving the instant noodles for when the phone lines opened up for a short time each day to boil water. The phone suddenly rang. "Grandma, phone." Xiaohu pointed. nThe sneered, her eyes full of contempt. She figured it was one of the neighbors she'd ripped off. She didn't feel guilty about those suckers at all. In fact, she thought they were fools, but when she picked up the phone and saw the caller ID, a look of fear washed over her face. Zhang. What does he want? Zhang was a local tough guy with a reputation. He had a crew of followers and rumors of connections. She, a small-time neighborhood official, couldn't afford to mess with him. nThe answered the phone. Zhang's voice boomed, "Hey, nThe. You really are good at talking people out of their supplies, huh?" nThe tensed up at the mention of supplies. She cleared her throat. "Well, as head of the neighborhood committee, it's my job to coordinate and manage resources for everyone." Zhang scoffed. "Yeah, right. Well, my guys are running low. Bring the supplies over, pronto." nThe's face fell. She hadn't expected this thug to come knocking on her door, demanding a payoff. She conveniently forgot that she had swindled the supplies from her neighbors through shameless means. Although Aunt Lin didn't dare cross Qin Zhenghao, she wasn't about to hand over the supplies that would help her and her grandson survive. She grit her teeth and said, "I still need to sort the supplies. Some people haven't handed theirs in yet, so I can't distribute them." Qin Zhenghao was losing patience. This old woman really didn't know when to quit, trying to stall him with lame excuses. He barked, "Don't be a damn fool. Are you hoarding it all for yourself? I'm telling you, hand over the stuff, or, I'll come and get it myself." Aunt Lin turned white as a sheet, trembling, not knowing what to say. She'd always been a bully, cunning and arrogant when dealing with ordinary people. But she was completely out of her depth with someone like Qin Zhenghao. She managed to stammer, "What do you think you're doing? I'm warning you, don't cause trouble. I'm the head of the neighborhood committee." Qin Zhenghao roared with laughter. "Oh, please. You think you're somebody? If you don't give it to me, I'm coming to take it." Qin Zhenghao hung up the phone. It was freezing outside, so he had called his crew to his place. More people meant more warmth, and also because Zhang Yi had hosed them down with cold water, many were sick. Someone had to take care of them. Plus, Qin Zhenghao had a little foresight. He realized the situation was deteriorating, so he was consolidating his forces. If things got bad, having backup would give him an advantage. But so many people needed to eat, he hung up and called his boys, and a group of them charged towards Aunt Lin's house. Qin Zhenghao, using a mop as a crutch and a baseball bat in his other hand, headed towards Aunt Lin's door. Zhang Yi saw it all clearly through the security camera. He sat on the TV with his legs crossed on the coffee table, eating potato chips and watching the drama unfold. "Looks like it's about to get ugly," Zhang Yi said with a grin. It was only the 5th day of the apocalypse, but there was already a show, with both sides being people he hated. Zhang Yi was in a great mood. Then he thought about those dumb neighbors who had been conned by Aunt Lin. Based on his memories of his previous life and his knowledge of these neighbors, even after this, people would still fall for her tricks. There was no other way. People always hoped for the best. Also, because of thousands of years of Confucianism, Chinese people instinctively obeyed Aunt Lin, who represented the neighborhood committee. Just like that, Aunt Lin was picking up the wool layer by layer. Zhang Yi touched his chin. "What if I post what's happening here to the group?" Zhang Yi smiled mischievously. "That will definitely be quite exciting." So he hit the record button. After Qin Zhenghao and his crew arrived at Aunt Lin's house, they started banging on the door, demanding that she open up. Yuelu community was a decent neighborhood, and every house had a security door, but everyone knew security doors were only good against petty thieves, not a full-on assault. Aunt Lin's place wasn't like Zhang Yi's. Although Aunt Lin desperately tried to hold the door shut, the lock couldn't hold back a bunch of angry thugs. They went to town with baseball bats, steel bars, and crowbars, and soon the lock was busted. It was obvious this wasn't their first rodeo. Once the lock was broken, the table and sofa Aunt Lin had piled against the door were useless. Through the camera, Zhang Yi could see the sheer terror on Aunt Lin's pale face. Chapter 27 Kick Lin Xiaohu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Soon, Zhang Yi heard Aunt Lin's screams. After Qin Zhenghao barged into the room, he slapped Aunt Lin across the face. "You old crook, I told you not to scam our neighbors for supplies. I'm doing God's work." Qin Zhenghao laughed. The slap sent Aunt Lin sprawling. She was dazed and couldn't speak for a long time. Qin Zhenghao told his guys, "Search the place. We're taking all the food and drinks in this house. This stuff belongs to the neighbors she swindled. Let's not make it easy on her." The guys grinned, exchanged glances, and went to work, searching every nook and cranny of Aunt Lin's house. Before long, they turned up loads of instant noodles, bread, cookies, mineral water, and other stuff. Aunt Lin crawled over, sobbing, and grabbed Qin Zhenghao's leg. "You can't take everything. We have our own stuff stored here too. How are my grandson and I supposed to live if you take it all?" Qin Zhenghao glared at her and sneered, "Not my problem. Get lost." Then, he kicked her in the face with his good leg. "Ah!" Aunt Lin screamed and fell backward. Just then, a shout came from the bedroom. "You jerks, get out of here!" It was Aunt Lin's grandson, Xiaohu. When he saw his secret stash of chocolate cookies being uncovered, his eyes went wide with anger. He grabbed a paring knife from a drawer and stabbed little Karami in the butt. In this freezing weather, any injury could be fatal. Little Karami screamed in pain. He turned and saw that the person who'd stabbed him was just a kid. His rage boiled over. Damn it, he thought, if this gets around, how will I ever be taken seriously? You little punk, little Karami, furious, kicked Xiaohu in the stomach with everything he had. A grown man's full-force kick was way too much for a 6-year-old. Xiaohu screamed, flew through the air, slammed into the wall, and slid to the ground like a piece of trash. It was a brutal sight. Chen Zhenghao and the others laughed. Ha ha ha. Lao Wu, where did you learn those moves? Kicked that little brat clear across the room. Awesome. Little Karami, nicknamed Lao Wu, pulled the knife out of his rear end and said proudly, pretty sweet, huh? Should have filmed that. Aunt Lin, already hurting, had been playing dead on the floor, but when she saw her precious grandson get kicked so hard, she cried out, Xiaohu, my grandson. She scrambled towards him. Chen Zhenghao pointed at Aunt Lin and said self-righteously, this is the price you pay for ripping off our neighbors. I'm doing the right thing. The group laughed, grabbed their loot, and left Aunt Lin's place. The ugly scene made Zhang Yi raise an eyebrow. Seeing the despicable Aunt Lin and her family get roughed up, Zhang Yi was happy and felt no sympathy. However, it also showed that the civilized rules that had been holding their building together were starting to crack. Things were about to get a lot uglier. After all, once you get a crack in the ice, it spreads fast. Well, too bad for them, but it doesn't really affect me, Zhang Yi thought. It's boring watching them fight to the death for a few supplies when I can just chill at home. Zhang Yi lay on the sofa, smiling and sighing. Then, he sent the video he'd recorded to the building's group chat. The people who had been scammed were still venting their anger at Aunt Lin. Then, they saw Zhang Yi's video. In the video, Chen Zhenghao's crew trashed Aunt Lin's house, beat her and her grandson, and took all the stolen supplies. The tenants were instantly delighted. Ha ha ha, you old liar, you had it coming. Way to go, Chen. That's how you deal with scum like that. This is what happens when you're a cheat. Serves her right. She lost more than she gained. Hilarious. Even though the tenants knew they'd never see their stolen goods again, watching Aunt Lin get beat up made them feel good. Some were even calling Chen Zhenghao a hero and praising him. Chen, you're the best. A true gangster with a code of honor. If it wasn't for Chen, we couldn't do anything with a scumbag like her. Be careful, Chen. That old lady is crazy. Watch out she doesn't call the cops on you. Some even worried about Chen Zhenghao and gave him advice. Chen Zhenghao gained fame and supplies. He didn't get any collective resistance from the residents and got a lot of materials. Zhang Yi looked at the chat and smirked, shaking his head. These people had no idea Chen Zhenghao could break into Aunt Lin's house today, but someday, he could break into theirs, and as people lost hope, it would happen soon. But seeing everyone chatting happily showed that they still had some supplies. Most families weren't as desperate as they claimed. Many people in the neighborhood worked at the warehouse and had a habit of stockpiling supplies. Even those who didn't would buy discounted stuff and stash it away. A box of soon-to-expire instant noodles could feed a family of 3 for 4 or 5 days. They were barely surviving. Quality of life was a distant memory. Zhang Yi stopped reading the chat. He got an archery target from the other dimension and set it up on the wall. Then, he grabbed his hand crossbow and compound bow and practiced his aim. Even though his safe house was like a steel fortress, he couldn't let himself get complacent. Only by honing his survival skills every day could he make it to the end. Besides, target practice was a good way for Zhang Yi to entertain himself. As for shooting guns, he didn't need to practice. He had a membership card from the Design Association and knew how to use firearms. He wasn't a marksman, but a gun was a powerful deterrent. He only had 100 bullets, and they couldn't be reused like arrows, so he had to conserve them. Chapter 28. One pack of instant noodles costs 2,000 yuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aunt Lin got robbed at home by Chen Zhenghao. He took all her supplies and beat her and her grandson, Xiaohu, too. The old lady was hanging in there, still able to move, but little Xiaohu Chen Zhanghao's punk kicked him hard in the gut. The 6-year-old kid couldn't take a hit like that, and it messed up his insides. Desperate, she begged for help from the other residents, hoping someone could save her grandson, but because she'd ripped them off on supplies before, everyone was disgusted with her, and nobody wanted to lift a finger. Ugh, I know I messed up. But my grandson's innocent. He's just a kid, please, somebody help him. Aunt Lin was sobbing her heart out in the group chat, her voice filled with despair. Nobody felt sorry for her. Instead, someone laughed. Who knows if she's faking it again? Yeah, besides, we're not doctors, we can't help her. If you hadn't scammed everyone with the supplies in the first place, Brother Hao wouldn't have roughed up your grandson. You brought it on yourself. Aunt Lin was breaking down, crying, it's all my fault, every bit of it. Just save my grandson, I'll get on my knees for you. Just then, a woman named Zhou Qi chimed in. Let me take a look at the kid. I can't promise I can fix him, though. When Zhang Yi saw Zhou Qi's message, he pictured her right away, tall, classy, with a long ponytail. Zhou Qi was a doctor at Tianhai First People's Hospital. In his past life, she'd used her medical knowledge to save tons of people, one of the few genuinely good people in the neighborhood. She was usually a little distant and didn't chat much with the other residents, but this time, seeing Xiaohu's life was on the line, she stepped up and spoke out. Aunt Lin also remembered there was a doctor in the building and, with huge gratitude, quickly took the kid to her. Half an hour later, Aunt Lin's anxious voice popped up in the group again. Does anyone have any hemostatic drugs, anti-shock drugs, or antibiotics? My little tiger needs surgery. Please help me. I'm begging you. Lin Xiaohu was seriously injured, his liver ruptured from that kick. Even though Zhou Qi was a doctor, she didn't have that many drugs at home. When the other residents heard Aunt Lin's plea, they just smirked and stayed quiet. Seriously? Nobody had that stuff lying around. Chen Zhanghao was still making sarcastic comments in the group. Why are you begging? You gonna get on your knees in a group chat? A chorus of ha-ha-ha laughter followed. Aunt Lin's voice was choked with tears. If it'll help, I'll do it right now. Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. He actually had all those drugs in his alternate storage, but no way was he using them to save Lin Xiaohu. In the apocalypse, medicine was as valuable as food, and he wasn't about to give himself away. Besides, he hated Aunt Lin and that spoiled kid and that kind of injury. Even if he could patch him up, he wouldn't survive the long, cold winter. Better to keep those meds for himself. No matter how much Aunt Lin begged in the group, nobody offered to help. Finally, Dr. Zhou Qi sent a message to the group. She said she'd managed to temporarily stabilize Lin Xiaohu, but it was just a band-aid and wouldn't last. He needed surgery at the hospital to have any chance. She also mentioned that if anyone else had a medical emergency, she'd help out. Then came the flood of compliments. Even Chen Zhanghao and that trust fund kid, Su Hao, gushed about Zhou Qi's doctorly compassion. Normally, nobody really cared for this aloof doctor, but now that everyone was scared to death, they were all trying to get on her good side. Zhang Yi still kept quiet in the group, just watching how things played out. Fang Yuqing hadn't contacted him in days. Zhang Yi was fine with that, but he knew that Drama Queen would be back soon, begging for something. She wasn't hitting him up now because she was trying to save face. She always thought she was too good to bow down to a guy, unless he was rich, of course, but what about later? The snow was still coming down, and the entire first floor was buried. Now, you couldn't even think about leaving the complex, let alone the city. You'd have to wade through 15 feet of snow. It was only a matter of time before the supplies ran out. When that happened, Drama Queen would definitely come crawling to Zhang Yi. A week had passed since the end of the world. 7 days wasn't much, but for a bunch of people stuck inside, freezing their butts off, it felt like 7 years. At first, they were full of hope. Now, everyone was starting to realize the truth. The chances of getting rescued were basically zero. They'd seen online that the whole world was getting hammered by a once-in-a-lifetime blizzard. The entire planet was getting buried. Some cities up north were seeing temps hundreds of degrees below zero. The snow was so heavy, entire cities were under ice. The government was still putting out messages, saying to stay strong, help each other, and hang in there. But looking at the frozen city outside, everyone was losing hope, supplies were dwindling, and tensions were rising. Chen Jianghao had stolen all the food from Aunt Lin's place, and her grandson was dying in bed, which had driven her over the edge. She'd been screaming in the group all day, saying she was in charge of the neighborhood and everyone had to hand over their supplies to her. But now, everyone had caught on, and nobody was paying her any attention. In the group chat, Xiaohu, a mom who lived on the 12th floor, suddenly sent a message. Does anyone have any food? My kids and I haven't eaten in 2 days. I can pay a lot for it. That message changed everything in the group. Before, everyone thought the disaster would pass, and the city would reopen, so, even if people were selling food, they were only charging a few times the normal price. But now, more and more people were running out of stuff. At this point, food was life, it was hope. Soon after, someone said, I've got a few packs of ramen left. I guess I could sell them. But I want $1,000 a pack, $1,000 for a pack of ramen. That was unthinkable before. They probably didn't realize how much that one deal would change the whole building. Zhang Yi watched his phone, chin in his hand, and said calmly, here we go. Xiaohu didn't reply, clearly still unsure. People still had a little hope that the storm would end soon, and then they'd have to get back to living and making money. Just then, Xiaohu, the rich kid who hadn't said anything in a while, suddenly popped up. I'll give you $2,000 a pack. I'll take everything you've got. Chapter 29 Day. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Hao's words blew up the chat group. Wait, $2,000 for a pack of ramen. Am I hearing things? Dude, don't jack up the prices like that. You're scaring me. Someone chimed in, their voice trembling, this snow's gotta stop eventually, right? We don't need to go this far. He sent a voice message, and his panic was obvious. People were still clinging to hope. Every morning, they woke up praying to see the snow gone, the sun shining, and life back to normal. But Xiaohu and that rich kid Chen Hao buying up food at insane prices hit a raw nerve. Someone tried to play it cool, 2,000 for ramen. You'd think it was the end of the world, It's just a little snow. Winter came early this year. It's not like it's a zombie apocalypse. Zhang Yi just chuckled and shook his head when he saw the news. Zombie apocalypse? Don't compare that cheap crap to this ice age. Zombies are scary, sure, but humans can still beat them. But against a natural disaster, humans are just tiny bugs. They had no clue what kind of hell was coming. Xiaohu, the rich kid, bragged in the group, don't sweat it. I got the cash, so I'm buying peace of mind. You wanna sell? DM me. If not, keep your stuff. He acted like he didn't care, but Zhang Yi could see right through him. His cool act was just a front. He was already freaking out. Why else would he offer 2,000 for ramen? It wasn't rocket science. Xiaohu might be loaded, worth millions, but in the apocalypse, he couldn't live the high life anymore. He couldn't even order takeout. Rich people might be jerks, but they're not dumb. He realized how bad things were and started buying supplies from his neighbors at crazy prices. Xiaohu, the mom, piped up, how can you do this? We have nothing to eat. Buying food is life or death. Xiaohu shrugged, I'm not stealing. I'm just offering more. It's up to them who they sell to. Mind your own business. Xiaohu, ignored, started crying in the group, someone please help us. My daughter's only 9 months old. I have no food, so I have no milk. We're both gonna starve. The other residents stayed silent. Human selfishness was on full display. Xiaohu was offering 2,000 for ramen. Xiaohu was offering half that. The average salary in the city was only $5,000. Who would sell their hard-earned supplies for peanuts? Plenty of people had already messaged Xiaohu and started making deals. Xiaohu seemed to get it and kept crying in the group, begging for help, but still, nobody said a word, not even a hang in there. If they opened their mouths, Xiaohu might think they were suckers and try to take advantage of them. The desperate mom broke down in tears. She had an 8-month-old, and it was hard enough for her to survive, let alone a baby who couldn't do anything for herself. Zhang Yi remembered Xiaohu from his past life. she hadn't made a big impression, because she always played the helpless mom card. She used it to get sympathy and trade for supplies, and she survived. But something was off, in Zhang Yi's memory. She and her daughter did pretty well. A light bulb went off in Zhang Yi's head. This woman wasn't as innocent as she looked. She was probably hiding something. She'd probably stab you in the back in a heartbeat. Zhang Yi knew that trying to be a hero would get you killed in the apocalypse, so he stayed quiet and watched Xiaohu. Too many people died in the apocalypse. He just wanted to look out for number one. Everyone else could drop dead, but Xiaohu's cries finally worked. The security guard, Uncle Yu, felt bad and agreed to give her some food. Xiaohu thanked him profusely, saying she'd never forget his kindness. Zhang Yi saw on the security cameras that Xiaohu used his money to buy supplies from a bunch of neighbors. Not a ton, but enough for him and his girlfriend to last a few weeks. Zhang Yi sneered, that's the last bit of use money has in the apocalypse. It wouldn't be long before people realized money was just paper, and supplies were king. He wondered how many people would regret selling their supplies then. Xiaohu had definitely set a bad example, and a lot of the residents were friends and co-workers. Xiaohu spending all that cash affected everyone around him. When he flashed the cash and offered crazy money, everyone realized how scarce things were. Everyone started hoarding even more. At the start of the snowstorm, some people had been friendly, sharing and trading supplies with their neighbors, but now, they were tighter than Scrooge. Even if their best friend asked to borrow food, they'd make up some excuse to say no. The Ice Age started on the 10th day. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning were down to their last scraps. The two food snobs who used to only eat high-end stuff were now fighting over a pack of ramen. They were almost out of the food that Zhou Peng, the simp, had bought them. If things kept going like this, they'd starve to death in a week, tops. They were huddled on the couch, wrapped in blankets, looking pale. There was an unopened pack of hardtack on the coffee table. Lin Caning looked at the hardtack and said to Fang Yuqing, "This is it. Our last pack." Fang Yuqing looked miserable. She used to rather die than let that kind of cheap food touch her lips, but now, she ate every crumb and even picked up the crumbs off the floor and ate them. Chapter 30 High-Quality Spare Tire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Caning continued, "We've got 5 bags of dry noodles and 3 of instant ramen left. There's half a bottle of Lao Ganma in the kitchen, but we're totally out of steamed buns and regular noodles." Fang Yuqing groaned, clutching her head. "Just noodles? That's not gonna fill us up." Lin Caning stared at her. "Yuqing, things are seriously messed up out there. Do you really think this snow is ever going to stop?" Fang Yuqing blinked, then turned and stared blankly out the window. Through the icy glass, she could barely make out the endless swirl of snowflakes. It had been snowing for 10 days, a constant blizzard. The second floor was completely buried, trapping them inside. The streets in the distance were eerily silent, no sign of snowplows. Fang Yuqing's heart plummeted. She felt utter despair. How long would this storm last? Would it ever end? She covered her eyes, sobbing. "Ning Ning, what are we gonna do? We're going to starve to death." Lin Caning gritted her teeth. "What about Zhou Peng? Does he have any food left?" Fang Yuqing shook her head. "I've already squeezed him dry. I asked him so many times, even tried flirting with him. He's got nothing left. The 2 packs of ramen he gave me last time were his last. He's as skinny as a zombie. He definitely doesn't have anything." Lin Caning clenched her fists, frustrated. "Then, is there anyone else we can hit up? I mean, we're both hot. If we just put in a little effort, some guy would definitely be willing to help us out." Fang Yuqing shot her a look. "Are you dumb? These days, supplies are everything. Even if they're interested, they're not going to just hand over food. Plus, it's freezing. Even if we showed up at their door offering ourselves, they probably wouldn't have the energy." A flash of pain crossed Fang Yuqing's face as she said this. Lin Caning didn't know, but Fang Yuqing had already tried that route. Trying to trade her looks for food, but she'd set her sights too high, demanding the guy be over 6 feet, a government employee, and making at least 15 grand a month before she'd even consider putting out. Even the 60-year-old neighbor had said, "You're too late. If you'd come a couple weeks ago, I might have been able to get it up. Lin Canning bit her lip, a wave of fear washing over her. She'd been counting on her looks as her last resort, but the cold was clearly the perfect cure for horniness. Suddenly, the image of a man popped into her head. She turned to Fang Yuqing. "Hey, what about that simp of yours?" Fang Yuqing knew exactly who she meant. She pursed her lips, a stubborn look on her face. "Ugh, that jerk. He can come crawling on his knees begging for forgiveness before I reach out to him." She'd hinted to Zhang Yi a few times, hoping he'd bring supplies to win her over, but he'd been cold, even sending photos to taunt her. She was furious, vowing to make him grovel at her feet. She wasn't about to break down and contact him now. It would ruin her Ice Queen image, and she couldn't have that, not if she wanted to snag a rich husband someday. Lin Canning argued, "Don't you remember? He stocked up on a ton of food. He's still way better off than most people, even after a month. If you just give him a call, he'd drop everything to bring you food." Fang Yuqing's ears perked up at the mention of food, but she still hesitated. "But he was so cold when I tried before." Lin Canning rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous. He probably thought he wasn't good enough for you, so he was trying to give up. You were pretty harsh on him a while back." Fang Yuqing immediately perked up, her face brightening. "He deserved it. Acting like some rich guy when he's just middle class. I wasted so much energy on him." Lin Canning grinned. "Well, now he's the perfect backup plan." "And what's a backup plan for if you can't use them when you need them? Just give him a little smile, fan the flames of hope, and he'll give you whatever you want."